My family excluded me from a fancy dinner they were organizing, but they expected me to set the table and clean up afterward. Instead, I made a reservaton at my favorite restaurant and turned off my phone. When they came looking for me to help, "You'll come early on Friday to set the table. Right, Audrey?" my mom asked over the phone, her voice brisk and full of purpose. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, momentarily stunned. "Wait, what's happening Friday?" "The dinner party for Brian's promotion," she said, as though it should have been obvious. I frowned, switching the phone to my other ear. "I wasn't invited." "Well, of course not," she replied, her tone dismissive. "It's mostly Brian's colleagues and friends. You wouldn't really fit in." Her words stung, but I kept my tone neutral. "But you still want me to come and set the table?" "Exactly," she said, as though I'd just solved a puzzle. "You're so good at these things, Audrey. You've always had an eye for detail. And don't worry about staying long. Just help set up and make sure everything's ready. We'll handle it from there." I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. Once again, I wasn't good enough to be a guest, but I was indispensable when it came to doing the grunt work. My name is Audrey, and for my family I'm not much more than a reliable extra. The one they call when they need someone to clean up a mess or make sure everything is picture perfect for Brian's endless parade of accomplishments. I've been overlooked and underestimated for years. But hearing my mom casually dismiss me like this, like I wasn't even worth pretending to include, still cut deep. "That's fine," I said finally, my voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "What time do you want me there?" 4 o'clock sharp, my mom said cheerfully. "We'll need time to get the table set, the candles lit, and the appetizers plated. Oh, and could you bring some extra napkins? We might run out." "Sure," I said, forcing a tight smile she couldn't see. "Thanks, Audrey. You're such a lifesaver," she added before hanging up, not even waiting for me to say goodbye. I set my phone down and stared out the window of my small apartment, the frustration building with every passing second. I'd moved out years ago to escape this exact dynamic, but no amount of distance seemed to matter. As I sat there, my phone buzzed with a notification. A reservation app I hadn't used in months popped up with a suggestion: a table for one at my favorite restaurant this Friday night. My finger hovered over the screen, hesitating for only a moment before I tapped reserve. For once they could manage without me. By Thursday afternoon, my phone was buzzing non-stop. "Don't forget to pick up the extra napkins," one text from my mom read. "Brian's boss is bringing his wife, so make sure the table settings are perfect," came another. Each message made me grip my phone tighter, my frustration growing by the second. They hadn't even bothered to ask if I wanted to help. They just assumed I'd show up like always, ready to work behind the scenes. But this time, I had other plans. Living in my own apartment was supposed to give me some space from their constant demands, and for the most part, it had. But when it came to family events, it didn't seem to matter where I lived or how many miles were between us. I was still dependable Audrey, the one they could always count on to do the things they didn't want to deal with. I sat on my couch, staring at the confirmation email for my Friday night reservation at my favorite restaurant. Part of me felt guilty for booking it. Was it wrong to leave them hanging when they clearly needed help? But then I thought about all the times I dropped everything for them, only to be dismissed, ignored, or outright excluded. This wasn't just about Friday night. It was about years of being overlooked. No, I thought, opening my phone to silence their endless messages. This time they can figure it out on their own. On Friday morning my mom called. "Audrey, just a quick reminder to be here by 4, she said cheerfully. "We're counting on you to make sure everything's ready before the guests arrive." I hesitated for a beat, then said, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll take care of it." "Oh good," she said, clearly relieved. "You always know how to make things perfect." "I don't know what we'd do without you." "Yeah," I replied softly, "I know." As the day went on, I got ready, not to help with their dinner party but for my own night out. I put on my favorite dress, did my makeup and grabbed my purse, feeling a strange mix of nerves and excitement. When I locked the door to my apartment and stepped into the cool evening air, a weight lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I wasn't putting their needs above my own. By the time the clock struck 7:30, I was seated at my favorite table, a glass of wine in hand and a smile on my face. Let them figure it out, I thought, savoring the first sip. Tonight they were on their own. As I settled into my seat at the restaurant, the world outside seemed to fade away. The soft of conversation, the clinking of glasses and the warm glow of candlelight made me feel at ease in a way I hadn't experienced in years. The waiter approached with the menu, smiling warmly. "Good evening. Are you ready to order?" "Not just yet," I replied, "but I'll take a glass of your house red to start." He nodded and disappeared into the background, leaving me to savor the moment. Back at my parents' house I could only imagine the chaos. My mom would probably be pacing around the kitchen wondering why I wasn't there yet. My dad would try to calm her down with his usual, "She's just running late." And Brian, he'd probably assume I'd flaked out, because in his world I was always the unreliable one. I thought about how they'd react when it finally dawned on them. I wasn't coming. The wine arrived and I took a sip, letting the rich flavor linger on my tongue. As I glanced around the room I noticed other diners, some laughing with friends, others enjoying quiet moments alone. I realized this was the first time in years I'd treated myself to something like this. No errands to run, no tables to set, no family demands to meet. For once it was just about me. Meanwhile my phone buzzed in my purse, but I ignored it. I already knew the texts and voicemails piling up. "Where are you, Audrey? The guests will be here any minute. Why aren't you answering your phone?" I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. When the waiter returned, I ordered a dish I'd been eyeing for months but had never found the right occasion to try. As the meal arrived, beautifully plated and steaming with rich aromas, I couldn't help but smile. This was what freedom felt like, deciding what I wanted, when I wanted, without anyone else's expectations weighing me down. By the time dessert arrived, I was completely at ease. The tiramisu was decadent, the perfect end to a perfect evening. Let them scramble, I thought, savoring another bite. They'd figure it out eventually, and maybe, just maybe, they'd start to realize how much they'd taken me for granted. But for now, that wasn't my problem. Back at my parents' house, the scene was everything I'd imagined, and worse. "Where is she?" my mom demanded, pacing back and forth in the kitchen. Her voice had that sharp edge it always got when things weren't going according to plan. "She said she'd be here," my dad replied. His tone half reassuring, half uncertain. "Maybe she got held up." "Held up?" my mom snapped, throwing her hands in the air. "It's not like Audrey has anything else going on. She knew how important tonight was. How could she just disappear?" Brian strolled in, adjusting his tie with a smirk. "Honestly, I don't know why you keep relying on her. She's always been flaky." "Flaky?" my dad echoed, raising an eyebrow. "She's done everything for this family. She probably just forgot the time." "Forgot?" My mom's voice was shrill now. "She was supposed to be here an hour ago. The table's not set, the candles aren't lit, and the appetizers are still in the fridge. What am I supposed to tell our guests when they walk into this mess?" Brian shrugged, pulling out his phone. "Not my problem. Maybe next time don't put all your faith in someone who enough." My dad barked, silencing him. Meanwhile, I was halfway through my dessert at the restaurant, blissfully unaware of the chaos. The tiramisu melted in my mouth as I took another bite, savoring the layers of espresso-soaked ladyfingers and mascarpone cream. Across the room, a couple was celebrating an anniversary, their laughter filling the air. It felt good to be here, surrounded by warmth and light, instead of at home where my efforts would have been overlooked and unappreciated. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't even glance at it. Tonight, their emergencies weren't mine to solve. Back at the house, the tension had reached its boiling point. My mom finally grabbed her phone and dialed my number, her hand trembling with frustration. The call went straight to voicemail. "She's ignoring me," she said, staring at the phone in disbelief. Brian snorted. "I told you, unreliable." My dad sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Enough, Brian. Let's just focus on getting things ready. Audrey's not here, so we'll figure it out ourselves." "That's easy for you to say," my mom muttered. "You're not the one who has to explain this disaster to our guests." The doorbell rang, and the first guests arrived, stepping into a house that was anything but ready. My mom plastered on a smile, but I could tell, even from miles away, that she was seething inside. I could imagine her glancing around the unfinished dining room, the unlit candles, and the untouched appetizers, silently cursing me for not being there. And for the first time, I didn't care. As the evening wore on, I took my time, relishing every moment at the restaurant. The server had just refilled my glass of wine when I decided to take a peek at my phone. The screen lit up with a flood of missed calls and text messages. "Where are you? Guests are arriving. Everything's falling apart. We need you now. You're being so selfish, Audrey." I smirked, setting my phone back down without responding. For years I dropped everything to help them. Tonight they could manage without me. Back at the house, the dinner party had devolved into barely contained chaos. The dining room table was set, but it lacked the polished touch my mom had been counting on. The silverware was mismatched, the tablecloth was greased, and the candles sat unlit in their holders. "Why aren't the appetizers out yet?" my mom hissed at my dad, who was frantically trying to open a bottle of wine. "I'm doing the best I can," he snapped, the corkscrew slipping in his hand. "You said you'd handle the appetizers." "I said Audrey would handle it," my mom retorted, her voice sharp. "But she's not here, is she?" Brian, seated at the head of the table with a drink in hand, rolled his eyes. "Just calm down. No one's going to care about the tablecloth or whatever. Can we just start eating?" "Brian, this is your dinner party," my mom said, her face flushing with frustration. "You could at least pretend to care about the details. Maybe you should have invited someone who actually knows how to throw a party," one of Brian's friends muttered under his breath, loud enough for my mom to hear. Her eyes widened, and for a moment she looked like she might explode. While they scrambled to salvage the night, I was indulging in a decadent slice of cheesecake at my table. Across the room, I overheard a couple chatting with the waiter about their travels, describing the beauty of the Amalfi Coast. The conversation sparked something in me, a longing to experience more of life beyond the narrow box my family had kept me in. I made a mental note to add travel to my list of priorities, along with continuing to prioritize my happiness. As the dinner dragged on, my phone buzzed one last time. This time, it was a text from my dad. "We're sorry, Audrey. We shouldn't have assumed you'd handle everything. Can we talk later?" I read the message twice, my emotions a mix of satisfaction and vindication. For the first time, it seemed like they were starting to understand what they'd taken for granted. But tonight wasn't about them. It was about me. And with that, I turned my phone off and signaled the waiter for the check. By the time I left the restaurant, the air outside was crisp and quiet, a welcome contrast to the chaos I imagined was still unfolding back at my parents' house. I strolled to my car, feeling lighter than I had in years. For once, I wasn't weighed down by their demands or expectations. Tonight, I had chosen myself, and it felt amazing. As I started the engine, my phone buzzed again. I debated ignoring it, but decided to check. It was another message from my dad. "Dinner's over. Your mom is furious, but I think she understands now. Can we talk tomorrow, please?" I exhaled slowly, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Was this genuine regret or just another attempt to pull me back into the role they'd always expected me to play? I put the phone down without responding. Tonight wasn't about fixing things with them. It was about proving to myself that I didn't have to live under their thumb anymore. Back at the house, the fallout from my absence was in full swing. Guests had left earlier than expected, citing early mornings and long drives. The kitchen was a mess of half-empty plates and wine-stained glasses, and the once pristine tablecloth was now crumpled and dotted with spills. Brian had retreated to the living room, scrolling on his phone without a care in the world, while my mom stood in the kitchen, glaring at the disaster in front of her. "This wouldn't have happened if Audrey had been here," she muttered, slamming a plate into the sink. "Maybe," my dad said, leaning against the counter. "Or maybe we shouldn't have expected her to handle everything in the first place." She turned to him, her eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," he said slowly, "that Audrey has done more for this family than any of us give her credit for. And maybe it's time we start appreciating her instead of taking her for granted." My mom opened her mouth to argue but paused, her expression softening just slightly. By the time I got home, the messages had stopped. I slipped off my shoes, poured myself a glass of water and sank into the couch, feeling a deep sense of calm. The night hadn't been perfect. It wasn't like one dinner would change years of being overlooked, but it was a step. For the first time I had set a boundary, and it felt like the start of something better. As I turned out the lights and headed to bed, I thought about my dad's last message. Maybe I'd call him tomorrow. But tonight I was content to let them sit with the realization of what life was like without me holding it all together. Let them figure it out for once. The next morning I woke up feeling unusually refreshed. No barrage of texts or missed calls greeted me, which was a small but satisfying victory in itself. I brewed a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the early sunlight filter through the curtains. For once there was no weight of expectation hanging over me, no list of chores I was expected to complete. It felt good, peaceful even. By mid-morning my phone buzzed. It was a call from my dad. I hesitated for a moment before picking up. "Hi Dad." "Hey Audrey," he said, his tone unusually soft. "Do you have a minute?" "Sure," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I just wanted to apologize," he began. "Last night we shouldn't have assumed you'd drop everything to help. That wasn't fair to you." I blinked, momentarily caught off guard. My dad wasn't usually one to admit fault, especially when it came to family dynamics. "It's okay Dad," I said, though my voice wavered slightly. "I've just been feeling invisible lately, like I'm only valued for what I can do for everyone else." "I know," he said, sighing heavily. "Your mom and I talked about it after the guests left. We realized how much we've come to rely on you without ever really acknowledging how much you've done." "That means a lot to hear," I admitted, my chest tightening with a mix of relief and emotion. We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it felt like a step in the right direction. Later that day, Amanda came over to check in. She'd been my sounding board for years, always ready to offer advice or a glass of wine when things got tough. "So," she said, plopping onto my couch with her usual dramatic flair, "how'd it go? Did the dinner party collapse without you?" "Pretty much," I said with a smirk. "But the real surprise? My dad actually apologized." Her eyes widened. "Seriously? That's unexpected. Tell me about it," I said, shaking my head. "I think they finally realized how much they've taken me for granted." "Well, it's about time," Amanda said, raising an imaginary glass in a toast to Audrey, the unsung hero. As the day went on, I found myself thinking more about my dad's apology. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. I decided to text him later that evening. "Thanks for the call, Dad. It meant a lot. Let's talk more soon." His reply came quickly. "Anytime. We owe you more than an apology." It wasn't much, but it felt like a turning point. A small but meaningful shift in the way my family saw me. That night, as I curled up on the couch with a book, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in years. For once I wasn't carrying the weight of their expectations, and it felt freeing. Maybe things were changing. Maybe they weren't. But either way, I knew one thing for sure. I'd never let myself fade into the background again. The following week I decided it was time to have a proper conversation with my mom. My dad's apology had been a good start, but I knew she was the one who really needed to hear me. I called her on a quiet afternoon. She picked up on the second ring, her voice as brisk as ever. "Audrey, I wasn't expecting you to call. Everything okay?" "Yes, Mom," I said evenly. "But I think we need to talk." There was a pause on the other end. "About Friday?" "Among other things," I replied. "We met for coffee at a small cafe near her house." She arrived looking slightly defensive, her posture stiff as she sat down across from me. "Your father said you were upset," she started, skipping any pleasantries. "I wasn't just upset," I said, cutting straight to the point. "I was hurt, Mom. I've spent years doing everything for this family, helping at events, cleaning up messes, running errands. And it's like none of it even matters unless it benefits Brian." She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand. "Let me finish. You didn't even invite me to the dinner. You just expected me to set the table, handle the details and disappear when the guests arrived. Do you have any idea how that feels?" Her expression softened and she let out a heavy sigh. "Audrey, it wasn't intentional. We've just always counted on you to help because you're so dependable. You never complain." "That's the problem," I said. "I never complain because I was raised to believe it wasn't my place too. But I'm not just dependable, Mom. I'm your daughter and I deserve to be treated like I matter, not just for what I can do but for who I am." She looked down at her coffee, stirring it absent-mindedly. "You're right," she said finally. "We've been unfair to you. I didn't realize how much we were asking of you without giving anything back." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my chest. I'm not saying I won't help when it's needed, but I'm done being taken for granted. From now on I'm setting boundaries." The conversation ended on a surprisingly positive note. My mom apologized sincerely, and though I knew change wouldn't happen overnight, I felt a flicker of hope. Over the next few weeks, things started to shift. My parents began including me in more decisions, asking for my input instead of assuming I'd handle everything. Brian predictably stayed indifferent, but I didn't need his validation to know my worth. One Saturday I stopped by the house for dinner, an actual invitation this time. My mom greeted me warmly, and I noticed immediately that the table was already set. "Don't worry," she said with a small smile. "We've got everything handled tonight. You're here as a guest." I smiled back, feeling a rare but genuine connection. For the first time it felt like they were seeing me, not as the helper, but as an equal. The weeks that followed felt like a quiet revolution in my life. The changes weren't dramatic, there were no grand apologies or sweeping declarations, but they were real. And I could feel them in the little things. When my mom texted, it wasn't with a list of demands but with genuine questions about how I was doing. My dad called to check in, not to ask for help. And even Brian, while still as self-absorbed as ever, seemed to tread a little more lightly around me. One evening, I sat in my living room scrolling through photos from the dinner party my mom had finally shared. The table had been set haphazardly, and the mismatched silverware was hard to miss. For a moment I thought about how I would have made it perfect. The polished glasses, the neatly folded napkins, the lit candles. But then I smiled, realizing something important. It wasn't my job to make everything perfect for them anymore. They had managed imperfectly, and they had learned what it felt like to rely on themselves. Amanda came over a few days later, armed with takeout and her usual dramatic flair. "So how's life as a boundary-setting queen?" she asked, digging into a carton of noodles. "Surprisingly good," I said with a laugh. "It's weird though. Now that I'm not constantly running around for them, I have so much more time for myself." "Imagine that," she teased, raising an eyebrow. "What are you going to do with all this newfound freedom?" "I've been thinking about it," I said, leaning back on the couch. "Maybe I'll take that trip I've always talked about. Greece, Italy, somewhere warm and far away." Amanda grinned. "Now that's the Audrey I want to see." Later that night, as I cleaned up the empty takeout containers, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in years. The version of me who would have bent over backward to make everyone else happy was gone. This new version, the one who knew how to say no, how to prioritize herself, was here to stay, and it felt good. A few weeks later I got another text from my mom. "We're planning a family gathering next month. Would you like to come as a guest?" I read the message twice, surprised by the wording. There was no assumption, no expectation, just an invitation. I thought about it for a moment before replying, "I'd love to. Thanks for asking." When the day of the gathering arrived, I walked into my parents' house feeling lighter than I ever had before. My mom greeted me warmly at the door, giving me a hug that felt sincere. "Everything's ready," she said with a smile. "Come in and relax. We're so glad you could make it." The dining table was set, not perfectly but well enough, and the smell of roasted chicken filled the air. My dad was in the kitchen pulling appetizers out of the oven, while Brian lounged on the couch chatting with some of the other guests. For once I wasn't rushing around behind the scenes trying to make everything flawless. As the evening went on, I found myself enjoying the gathering in a way I hadn't before. I laughed with my dad over a silly story from my childhood, shared a glass of wine with my mom, and even exchanged a few cordial words with Brian. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. Later that night, as I helped my mom bring out dessert, she gave me a grateful smile. "I'm really glad you came tonight," she said softly. "It's nice having you here, just as you are." The words caught me off guard, but I could tell she meant them. "Thanks, Mom," I said, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in years. When I left the house that evening, the air was cool and quiet. As I drove back to my apartment, I reflected on how much had changed. My family wasn't perfect, and they probably never would be. But they were trying, and for the first time I felt like they truly saw me. Not just as someone they could rely on, but as a person with her own needs and boundaries. And for the first time, I felt like I could see myself clearly too. Back at home I curled up on the couch with a book, feeling a deep sense of contentment. The version of me who had walked out of their dinner party weeks ago was still here, stronger, more confident, and finally free to live life on her own terms. This was just the beginning.